Yes. Well, thanks everyone for coming today and uh, to hear my story with Stephen Hawking. I'm sure you all have heard about it. You know, and it's a fascinating story, and I thought like you know it would have been unusual for me to sit down or stand up in front of people and share it. But when I saw Karen, you know, about maybe 4 weeks ago, and we were reminiscing about my experience at Cambridge. She suggested, why don't you give a talk and speech? Maybe some people might be interested to hear that story. And it's indeed a very fascinating story. Now, here we go. As you probably all know, that Stephen died this March 2008. And when I heard about his death through some of my colleagues at Cambridge, who I actually spent a lot of time with, it was a very personal moment for me because I spent 4 years with him, while I was actually a postdoc, and brought to me kind of a lot of thoughts and memories, my years with him, and also everything, and if I learned with him about the universe, about black holes, about the Big Bang, whether the Big Bang existed, whether it really popped out of nothing. All these kind of topics, we kind of shared those discussions with him in a very nice and an amazing manner. And so it all came to me and essentially kind of brought back to me all kind of various questions that, how I ended up myself became, a theoretical physicist, and what was this journey for me from a personal point of view, and also the experiences I had with him. So how it all started for me, not like that, but essentially, in 1981, I kind of was living in Lebanon. Probably it's a small, nice country in the Middle East. But unfortunately, at that time, it was caught into a civil war. So it was very, all right. It was caught in a civil war, and as you can imagine, when you are in a country torn apart in a civil war, you're always dreaming to kind of get out and do something different from saying, people unfortunately killing each other and bombs and rockets blowing around you. So that was, for me personally, a very motivational experience to get out of the country. Luckily enough, I landed, an offer from Imperial College in London. So Imperial in the UK is like the MIT of the US. So it was a very good school in engineering, but it also has a very good school in physics. It had, very great physicists, and I just happened to be lucky to be working with, one of them. His name is Abdus Salam, who won the Nobel Prize for the electro-weak theory unification. So I came to Imperial, and the topic of unification was such a hot topic. Yeah, if nature really has some characteristic property where two forces, electromagnetism, and are really unified, and we can see them experimentally. Wow! How about the other two forces in nature, which is gravity and the nuclear forces, strong nuclear forces? So it was a very, very big, topic, and it was at the front end of theoretical physics at the time, in terms of research and in terms of, interest. So I ended up actually coming there. I did my first degree, which is called the Diploma of Imperial College. It's like the master's degree. You take a lot of research courses in general relativity, quantum mechanics, statistics, all that. You do an exam, and in the end, they decide to pick up, students for the thesis. So I was lucky to actually be picked up to kind of do my PhD with these two gentlemen, with Chris Hashim and Abdus Salam. So I was, of course, already, this is my first thrill, but now I'm finally able to actually tackle some of the most important questions in theoretical particle physics at the time, and with brilliant people. So what I kind of been thrown at, by my peers, of course, Salam and Aisham, is okay. We successfully unified electroweak theory. Go and solve it with gravity. I'm joking. It's not like that, as simple as that. I mean, already there were people, physicists were working on something called supergravity. And supergravity was a very promising theory in which it will actually combine, the electronic theory. The Nobel Prize was sitting here in this middle diagram, but now you want to actually bring the other two very important forces of nature, which is the strong nuclear forces and gravitational forces. So this is like, the grand finale of theoretical physics. And in fact, Stephen Hawking, many times said, we are going to solve this in the next 5 years, and physics is finished. We're done. We have the final answer. It's serious. It was as close as that. My task was, okay, take this so-called supergravity theory, and there were, very, very great physicists who were working on it at the time. But what I was interested in is to see, in fact, whether this theory, because it was so complicated in the world we live in, which is the four-dimensional world we live in, space and time, four, and there was a conjecture that maybe this very complicated theory, it might present itself into a very simple theory if the world has more than 4 dimensions, higher dimensional world, a world where, in fact, it is more than 4 space and time. Very fascinating. So I start working what I would call supergravity in 11 dimensions. Why 11? What's so special about 11? Because it just happened the characteristics of this theory can only exist up to 11. So if God has created this universe, he cannot mess out with number 11. So that's what it is. Okay? So 11 was the maximum dimension that the world we could live in. We just see 4 of them, microscopically, but there is a hidden 7 that they are so microscopic that we don't yet have the technology or the ability to even finesse or think about it. So my research work was to take this nice simple theory in 11 and see if I try to project it. This is a kind of simple term, project it or compactify it into 4, if it would spit out everything that we know about these 4 forces in nature. So fascinating. And indeed, so I spent almost actually a year working on this projection of this simple theory into 4 dimensions. And I came actually with a, interesting results at the time. So I chose those extra 7 dimensions to be, geometrically represented by some sort of a 7 sphere. Like a ball. A ball is a 3-dimensional. Imagine that 3-dimensional ball. It's 7. It's difficult to picture it in your head, but imagine that. And so I took this theory that lives in 11, and I tried to project it via these 7 dimensions to 4. And I came out with something very, very interesting at the time. So when I wrote my preprint on my article, of course, you send it out. There was no the technology that we have today, and of course, it landed on, some, professor at Cambridge who actually forwarded to Stephen Hawking. Okay. I didn't know that at the time, of course, but once I sent the preprint out, what happened is I got this call from Cambridge. That was in 1983. So I joined Imperial in 1981, 82. In 83, I finished the paper, submitted. I got a call from a lady, her name Cheryl. I still remember her name, which is nice because it was a fascinating call for me. And she said, we'd like to invite you to come and give us a talk about what you've done about this so-called supergravity theory in 11 dimensions and tell us, in fact, about this result. I was absolutely couldn't believe myself. And she said the invitation is from Stephen Hawking. So, directly from him. So you can imagine, young guy, just trying to find my way out in physics, and I get this call. So I was absolutely thrilled, running into the corridor of Imperial College, bumping into one of the professors, throwing his cup of tea on himself and on me, and just couldn't believe that actually I got this amazing opportunity that I would go to Cambridge and stand in front of this man, Stephen. And that was the beginning, So here you can see this nice picture. This picture is not only of Cambridge, it's of Gonville and Keyes College, which later I'll tell you what it is. This is the College of Stephen Hawking. So this is, probably if you know Cambridge, is multiple colleges, and usually professors are associated with certain college. This is the college where Stephen himself was associated. So after the call, I had 2 weeks to prepare my presentation, not a lot of time, because there was one slot, and they gave me that slot. You see, so it's not like I could choose when I can go and talk. So I worked myself a lot on that, and and I went to DAMP, which is actually a synonym for Department of Applied Mathematics and Theoretical Physics at Cambridge. It's a very well-known college. It looks different now from when it used to look 20 years ago, 30 years ago. And I was extremely nervous, not like now, then, very nervous. And I stood in front of actually, notable nice people like yourself, between students, postdoc, and Stephen, came and, he put his chair exactly like that, next to me here, so that, he can go upstairs so he can actually watch my presentation, And of course, I was terrified because he was actually just sitting next to me. It was a very funny experience, to look at him, because I actually was to focus on my presentation or focus on him. And then I decided to focus on my presentation, and I said, it doesn't matter. I know what I want to talk about, and I'm going to be, forthcoming with my science. And this is something very important. As a young scientist, like once you make your own, findings or discovery, you really want to present it in the strongest way, but you don't want to be arrogant also about it and claim that, oh, you solved, the ultimate answer. So my proposition said, okay, we have this beautiful 11-dimensional theory. It's simple in nature, it's beautiful, but, what complexities we are seeing in the 4-dimensional world is nothing but a manifestation of this simple, nice theory that lives in 11 dimensions. As if, the creator likes nature to be simple, and he likes his theories to be simple too. I didn't say that, of course, but that's the way what was going in my head, until, of course, Stephen shocked me later on when I started working with him, which I'll come to this news later. So I gave my speech, and I think what caught his attention is the fact, and I think you will see it later in my talk, why, that I said, look, we are going to choose extra 7 dimensions, so the world is 11. There's the macroscopic world we live in. We experience, height, length, and altitude and time. But then there's another extra 7 hidden, and that 7th dimension is timeless. He liked that word. Means it has no beginning and it has no end. Which I didn't know what was going in his head at the time. But the fact I mentioned that kind of resonated a lot with him. But no comment, of course. After I finished my talk, of course, in Cambridge, they have a nice culture where at 4 p.m. every day, you go and have tea and biscuits. So everybody, all the postdocs, the students, and the professors, which is very nice, they all come to that 4 p.m. It's like a cult. It's a Cambridge cult. Yeah, they all come and sit down, and if there's a speaker, they invite them to come and have. And guess who showed up? Stephen himself. So I, was invited to that tea ceremony with them, and he came, and everybody, of course, was asking different questions, and in the end, everybody can tell when he wants to ask a question, because his chair moves. So when his chair moves, means everybody's silent. Now he's about to ask a question. And then he came and asked me that question. He said, and it took, of course, a little bit of time, because Stephen at that time, he didn't have all this computerized stuff. He has actually to kind of use a little bit of his thumb on a computer-driven system, which later became advanced. But also he used to mumble, and that's very important. And there was at the time an assistant with him who actually was listening to him about the question. So at the time, he actually literally asked me the question without the assistance of the machine. And his question was, do you think really this extra 7 dimensions will solve the singularity problem of the Big Bang? Ooh. Now my head was, I said, wow, I should know about a bit about the Big Bang. And of course, I knew about the Big Bang then, because you need to kind of do your homework a little bit before you're meeting a guy like that. You need to understand what work he's on, what his interest. And I did that, which is very important also for some of you. Eventually when you are meeting someone who is highly an academic, or when you talk, is to do your homework a little bit before about what whom you are presenting to. Know his background and psychology. So I said, I don't know if it will solve the singularity problem that you, Stephen, worked on, which I'm going to come to. But it could be that when the world popped out of nothing, there was something, and this something was this seven timeless word, which we yet don't know how it is. He smiled. So that was, for me, wow, a sign of approval, because he liked the fact that there could potentially be a way to solve this so-called singularity, which I'm going to come about the Big Bang Theory, about the way the universe has started. Okay, let's see if I can. So what happened next is that, of course, I had a paper and I submitted for publication. And guess who actually was my referee? It was, and that was, it has a nice title, Supergravity and Supergeometries of Space and Time. In fact, when the paper was submitted, this is the date, and that's the journal, 1983, yeah? Of course, I don't want to show you all the complexities of that. You can go and read it, And of course, it was approved by Stephen Hawking himself, directly. So that was my first publication, yeah? And for him to approve it, that was, for me, a big testimony. That was, for me, the beginning, that, ultimately I embarked on some idea, on some results, which could actually have some meaning, in the cosmology or the universe that we are trying to understand, So guess what happened next? In 1984, I was 23 years old. I finished my PhD in physics. I was a young kid, actually, in that regard, compared to my tenors. And I got, in fact, an offer from Stephen to come and work for him at Cambridge, to pursue further, the work that I have been doing at that moment. He was so actually fascinated by that he really went. Why? Because as I'm going to come later, you're going to see that there is a fundamental question that still till this day is haunting one of the biggest brains in theoretical physics, which is the beginning of the universe, the beginning of time. This problem has not been solved. It's still this day, after 30 years, it's still haunting a lot of us, and there's a lot of mathematical techniques, a lot of methodologies, but still the problem is not answered. And of course, we understand a lot more now than then, and this is what I want to kind of share with you all the way up to today. So, he not only offered me the job, he actually made me join his college, Governance and Chiefs College. So that was actually for me also a great honor. That now I'm joining Steve Hawking not only in his group at DAMP, but also to join him on a social level, also at his college at Gonville and Cambridge and Keys. From then on, of course, my tenure was with him for many years, for a few years. So I spent with Stephen 4 years, where actually I, had daily interaction. Of course, the first 6 months, I was not doing a lot of physics. I wanted to actually be able to learn how to speak and communicate with him, because that's in fact even more important than the physics itself. I tried to understand, and English was not my first language, of course. So naturally, in fact, that made it a plus. Why? Because I was a bit more patient. I had to kind of really put a lot of effort to try to understand what he was trying to mumble, and to decipher his words. The computer at that time was not advanced to kind of touch point. So after 6 months, I was 50% there to kind of understand a little bit what he was trying to say to me. Not only to me, to other also people who were joining either students, and we used to, us, the students, the postdoc, which is I was a postdoc, to try to kind of help each other, how to understand his words, to decipher them. Almost you pick up your own dictionary of words and symbols and expressions, because sometimes he moves his eyelash, and you need to kind of understand, so it becomes also visual interaction with him as much as linguistic. And that is absolutely fascinating, because I've never had to deal with a person like that in my entire life. But then, luckily, in 85, towards the beginning of 85, they brought him a new computer system, and so he used to be able to actually, with his thumb, this thumb, press on a little ball and pick up the words and make sentences. Of course, it was not fast technology. Later, of course, they gave him something far more than that. So between, hearing him, being patient, And, it takes time. Working with him, it was not easy at all. But if you like him, and when you're around him, you fall in love with the man. He's becomes like, it's very hard to put it in words. You would be happy to spend 20 hours with him, and you will not even think that you get tired by the end of the day, exhausted, mentally, but you just love the experience itself. I could see him only twice a week, of course, because of his condition. Other people, I don't know where that came from. But then, of course, there were other professors, postdoc visitors, everybody wants his time. So for me, just to kind of be with him for like 4 or 5 hours every week, that was plenty. And the way it worked is that he kind of already had in his mind what he wants to work on. So he reads a lot. He has a time where he sits down and reads, and someone actually reads the paper with him. And sometimes I used to sit down and read the paper to him. Read it, literally read it, and sometimes blast the mathematics on it. He hits it in his head, and his computational capability, you'll be stunned to know how amazing it is. He actually can compute very complicated things in his head, and the way we can come to him is that he can give me some sort of an answer. I type it on on the chalkboard, and 80, 85, 90% of the time it's correct. If there were some errors into it, it's just because, of course, he's just doing it in his head. So imagine you're doing something very complicated, like looking at the solutions of Einstein's equations for the universe, and he gives you a solution that's 80% correct. I mean, it sends goosebumps in my hands even to this day. It was incredible. So what did I talk with Steven about? What was my special kind of relationship with him? Essentially, he was very much interested in this 11-dimensional theory. Why? Because what Steven was thinking is that there's one universe, and there was, and this universe came out of nothing. Yeah, I mean, this is was belief system until I think probably he died. I don't know if he has changed it. There was a big bang, and suddenly space and time born out of it. And that kind of philosophy or that vision impacted his philosophical view about life and about God and about creation, which we're going to come in a minute to that. Yeah. So for him, everything came out from a singularity, and that's one of his most famous work, the singularity of the Big Bang, the fact that things, boom, just happen. No? And here I am, coming in some subtle way, challenging that, and he was helping me to challenge this line of thinking. How? Because my 11-dimensional theory, when it goes down to 4, it doesn't predict only one universe, it predicts thousands and millions of universes. And they are different from each other. And actually the laws of physics happen to be the same in all these universes. And he knew that. He actually was far ahead the way I was thinking than anyone else. He could see that if the supergravity theory, which is supposed to unify all forces of nature, is correct, it's going to predict a model of the universe that's not going to be one universe, but many universes. And I was not there in his chain of thinking, but I could smell what is coming from him, fast. So, but he was still not ready to accept that idea. And I'm going to tell you why he didn't like the idea of multi-universes, because of certain issues which we will discuss, and that's why he was still then, in 1984, 85, he was still holding very tight about the fact that our universe is only one, and it came out of nothing, because there was a singularity, and boom, it happened just like that. This is a nice picture. Probably you've seen it. This comes from the microwave background, yeah? This is the Big Bang, yeah? And that's how our universe, in fact, evolved throughout time. Universes, galaxies. But the big question is, what is this? What is this Big Bang? That's what he was after all the 50, 60 years that he's done research. Can you imagine 60 years trying to address this question? Now, the general theory of relativity of Einstein, of course, what does it say? It says that actually the universe did come out from a Big Bang. There was a singularity. So he was not saying something which is wrong, because it's true. But what is not clear, whether actually the general theory of Einstein actually made sense, or it was a viable theory at that Big Bang moment. Why? Because at the Big Bang, nobody knew, or there is no theory to describe what is space and time. What is time? What is space? According to relativity, it says that time was born and space was born. It just popped out, yeah? And that could be in itself a fallacy of the fact that actually general relativity of Einstein itself breaks down. So isn't that nice? Newton came with the theory of relativity. It has its own shortcoming, and Einstein came to correct it. There's going to come someone in our history, hopefully if we're still around, who is going to come and tell us what is actually the right model of the world at just a fraction before the Big Bang happened. But we don't know. But for Hawking, there was a singularity. He proved it, and it was mathematically correct. It was a famous theory. He did it in 1967 with another great mathematician. His name is Roger Penrose. It's called the Hawking-Penrose. Well, that singularity is there, and that is the essence of the beginning of our universe. So that's why it's called the Big Bang singularity, because there was nothing before that. So someone said where and how and when, all these human questions, they become meaningless. Yeah? What, where? Where means coordinate. What, time, what? None of them kind of make sense. But this singularity actually impacted the way Stephen Hawking thought about the universe, about humanity, about aliens, about God and creation. It all came. It didn't come, unfortunately, I heard from a lot of people that, oh, maybe he's thinking about God and all that is because of his illness. That's utter rubbish. It's just because, he looked at the theory and he realized that in a very, simple term, that there was no beginning, there was no end, there was no time at the beginning of creation why there should be a creator. But we're going to come to that in later in my talk. So, despite that, despite my 11-dimensional theory, and it's nice and it's beautiful, and I was telling him about the fact we're going to have multi-universes here, Stephen still at that moment very hesitant to accept their conclusion. Why? Because he thought that maybe supergravity theory has a problem. So he was not ready yet to accept. It was another theory with its own characteristics. Okay. But what happened? What happened is that you can never hold on. That's the nice thing about the science. Never ever hold on to a theory as a belief. It's not religion. And that's very, very important. Unfortunately, there's a lot of scientists these days, they hold on to certain things. It's like religion. It's like believe in it or leave it, kind of thing. Now, even Stephen Hawking, after 24 years, so remember I told you in 1984 about the 11-dimensional supergravity? You compactify it, you get multi-universes. Guess what? After 24 years now, everybody is working on this 11-dimensional supergravity. And now, of course, I get invited to go and talk about it. But why? Because suddenly now the multi-universe theory is becoming very popular. Extremely popular for a lot of reasons, which some of it experimental, some of it not experimental. It's a separate term. So actually, in this year, Stephen actually wrote his last paper, and his last paper was on the multiverse theory of the world. Isn't that amazing? From 1985 to 2018, that's 24 years on, yeah, he suddenly completely departed from a universe which has no boundary, i.e. no beginning, no end. Now he's saying, actually, there could be a beginning. And there are going to be many universes, and they are countable. It's not like infinite universe. Of course, the theory that I was working on, it has infinite. His new paper saying there's finite amount of them, and actually there could be a beginning. It's a completely radical view, and unfortunately he died to kind of see the reaction of the physical community. So that's the theory, multiverse, look at that, yeah? All these are little bubbles, they're all universes. Okay. Now you might ask, well, why suddenly he accepted that? Why didn't he accept it then, 24 years ago, and now he accepted it? Because at the time, the multi-universe picture was, and rightly so, was giving infinite many universes, left, right, and center. All, if really God has created so many millions of universes, left, right, and center. And, well, how do I know they are there? How do I know, in fact, the laws of physics are there? How can I connect to this other universe? Some people say, well, maybe through the black hole. If you go to the black hole, if you could survive that, you can pop out into another universe. We don't know. Okay? So therefore, Stephen actually regulated completely that idea. That's it can be. It's just too random. Infinite many universes, it just doesn't make sense. That's why he resisted it for 24 years. But what happened in this 24 years is that theories like supergravity, and its evolution to something called superstring theory. Maybe you've heard about it, maybe you don't know it, but it's okay. Superstring theory is nothing but a more advanced version of supergravity theory, in which it does unify all the forces of nature. So it seems like, okay, gravity on its own, if Einstein on his own and there was no other particles in the world, maybe it is one universe. But the moment you include all other forces of nature, now they are ensemble, an orchestra, this unified one force, which is called string theory or supergravity, doesn't matter. It's telling you that there's finite amount of universes out there, and there's actually a beginning for those. It's no more the idea, well, things popped out of nothing. And shame that he died, because I would have liked to see, in fact, asking the same questions I'm going to ask him that I asked him actually back in 1984. So, as you can see here, number 3, his collaborator, his name is Hertog, which is also a good friend of mine, is saying actually the Big Bang could have been all wrong. Why? Because as I mentioned to you, relativity and Einstein's theory, which is with its greatest triumph, actually does break down as a theory at the Big Bang. So we don't know how time and space came about. After 3 seconds, the universe happened, and suddenly there's time and there is a space as a integrated concept. But before that, just about the Big Bang, we don't know what was there. We have no idea. We don't know. There's no even a theory to describe that. So Einstein's theory breaks, and therefore the string theory corrects the areas where Einstein's theory breaks, and therefore now makes new predictions. That there are many, many finite universes. There's no infinite of them. There's 5 of them. There's maybe 200, 300, but there's 5 of them. And then we can actually relate to them. Maybe we can jump from one universe to another universe through a wormhole, like in Star Trek, which you see it. Some of those ideas are not totally crazy because they talk to us about them. And we can navigate among all these finite amount of universes that we now, the theory is telling us what it is. So he wrote this paper and he died, and Hertog in fact came out with this last assertion, that yes, and even Stephen, I think he said it here, and I want to quote him in his, where is it? Here. This is his last statement, and very profound. We are not down to a single unique universe, but our findings imply a significant reduction of multiverse to a much smaller range of possible universes. He said that this year, so sometimes in February. So for me, that was a defining moment, even for me personally. Why? Because, when I was, just finished my PhD, and I'm telling him about supergravity and the multiverse, and of course he said, doesn't make sense. It's a very dignifying moment to know that this great man finally is accepting what science, not belief. He has strong belief about the universe, about this one universe. But he was ready to change it. He was ready to adapt. He was ready to accept challenges. And finally he accepted after 24 years into a new picture of things. So, are we living in a timeless world where there's no time? Perhaps, time is eternal. But he didn't say that. In his last book, Stephen's point is all the time, for me, I'm a scientist, and I'm out there to find the truth, to understand the truth, and to understand how the universe works. He was very brutally honest about that. There was no sentiments. There was no human emotion in terms of his condition. Of course, because anybody in his human condition, it will impact his way of thinking and his belief system, yeah? Sometimes you find people who actually suffer in life and they say, oh, there's nothing here. Some people suffer in life and say there's everything here. He was not that. He was very objective in the way he actually thought about the world we live in. And luckily, I had those encounters with him, privately in his office. And I'm going to share those with you. But I'm going to share them with you, and so that hopefully, you see that could the man change his view about God and creation? In fact, I was going to change this. I was going to say, hoping in his turbulent, battle with God, and knowing him, probably, in my point of view, probably he is the best believer in God than many people I know. Like, he's challenged that way of thinking in his mind, and he was brave to voice that. As a scientist, it's a taboo subject. And even now, no physicist will ask me, hey, Mustafa, do you believe in God? No. Do you believe in prophets? They don't know the word believe, And why? Because we as scientists are supposed to be objective, methodical. We are not supposed to ask metaphysical questions. It's a taboo to me. He was not afraid, and that was making him so unique as a person and so lovable by, through his books. That he was not afraid to tackle these questions, and not only that, and tell you the reason why, the way he's thinking. Okay, so let me share with you some of this. Okay? So you can see here the hand of God, and I would like to think that this is the hand of Stephen, and there's a little bit of a gap between them here. He didn't manage yet to join forces, but let's kind of tell you with it's a brief, but it was very profound. For me personally, in fact, and for those who actually I shared the story. So one afternoon, I was actually with him, like usual, talking about supergravity and no boundary and multiverse, and of course the conversation takes a long time because it's very slow for him to respond. And suddenly, out of nothing, out of nowhere, and I don't know why he did that, like almost he wanted to take a break from the physics. Stephen was a very intellectual man, and he was very mindful about the suffering of humans on the planet. Yeah, he was very mindful. Whether natural disasters, whether wars, whether catastrophes, he's not like a simple nerd who just focused on science, and I loved about him that. I could talk to him about politics. You talk to him about, climate change. You talk with him about wars. He was there. He knew it. He understood it, and he can challenge your thinking. He was just not a physicist just doing physics. And that's something also I learned in life. Be outside your box, whatever you are doing. Have a greater map in your head about, be aware of your surroundings. So that's very important. Physicists, unfortunately, when they wrote the nuclear bomb, they did not think very much awareness. They were just thrilled by the discovery of it. And when they discovered it, the moment they realized that they can do it, it was the biggest regret in all their life, starting from Albert Einstein to Oppenheimer and all that. Because you need to also think of the ramification of what you're doing, next one. If you are doing genetics, if you're doing artificial intelligence, which I'm about, think of the ramifications. Stephen Hawking always thought about the ramification of science, always, and its impact on war and all that. So one afternoon, coming from there, of course, and, seeing, the dark side of life there because it's war and all that, and, and he just started by saying, yeah, well, look, in the Middle East, just came out for, people have a lot of reverence to God. It's the land of all the 3-4 religions, yeah? People always talk about God. And of course, my attitude there at the time, someone who came out from war, and so man can kill man, I said, well, my answer to him was, I said, Stephen, I'm not quite sure. I think everybody has forgotten God in Lebanon because everybody is killing each other. And it came out spontaneous out of it. Because now I'm actually very comfortable in his surroundings, It's me and him, nobody else, So immediately that was my response. Then he responded back, and he said, well, reverence of God has nothing to do with it. It's always been wars. It doesn't matter, what kind of your religion, what's your back. I don't think people, when they are killing each other, they are thinking about God. So it has nothing to do with that. Okay. And then the third question came, which completely caught me off by surprise, from someone like him. And this is, I share it with you guys because it's just a very personal moment. And he said, what do you think about God and creation? I'm his postdoc, you know. A very kind of at the time young man compared to, and for him to ask me this question, why? Did he care about my opinion? He was curious about, me as a physicist, as a fellow physicist, and someone who's also working on the theory of the universe with higher dimension and supergravity. What would I think about that concept? So when he asked me that question like that, and I paused, I knew I need to be very responsible in my answer. I can't really say, oh, well, I believe in that book, and this is not count. You have to actually answer as much objective as possible, And my answer at the time was actually, I still hold that answer till now, because it's, from a scientific point of view, it's okay. I said to him, well, look, we all like quantum mechanics. Probably, who have heard of quantum mechanics? You all heard of quantum mechanics? It's one of the pillars of physics, yeah? It doesn't matter what you're doing, biology, physics, chemistry, it's one of the most profound things is quantum mechanics. But quantum mechanics, you can never prove it. It has something called axioms, 8 axioms, yeah? You don't prove them, you don't disprove them. Nobody can prove them, yeah? If you assume those axioms, and if you make discoveries, those discoveries essentially tell you that those axioms actually are correct, or could make sense, okay? That's exactly how I answered it. I said, you know what? I'm going to take God as an axiom. So you can never prove it, you can never disprove it. One of the two. But if the resulting laws of nature that comes out from this axiom, became more and more convincing, then be it. That was my answer. So essentially for me, it was not about whether I believe in God or God created the universe or didn't create the universe. It was, in fact, assume it's there, assume the laws of nature coming from it, and if the laws of nature keep proving themselves they're better and better, maybe this axiom is, embodying in that truth. So it was a very kind of, just from a scientific point of view, the right answer. So what did answer Stephen answer me back? It was simple. He said, well, and that's, believe it or not, this is kind of his general, because many people think that he was atheist. Not really, as such. He was more agnostic. He said to me then, when I said that, he said, yes, but if there is a God, that God must be very weak, because he cannot change the laws of physics and the laws of nature as we know. Yes. Yes. Yeah, because okay. Science doesn't try to prove there's a God or not God. That's exactly, because you can't. That's exactly my point. I said it's an axiom. Means there's no proof. So don't try to push into my thought there's a proof or disproof from any walks of life. It's an axiom, like the quantum mechanics, whether in fact that axiom has results that could make sense, it reflects correctly on the axiom. If not, it does not. From Stephen's point of view, here's the point. He is not interested to know about God either. Exactly. He wanted to know the truth, whether there was a beginning of universe, whether there was a beginning of space and time. Okay? Now, of course, people like to push on him, do you think God created the universe? He is Mr. Universe, yeah? Stephen Hawking is the greatest mind about, what is the status of the universe now. He thought about it all his life, in his brain. he says that I went to galaxies and I went into a black hole in and out in my mind. So naturally, people, and he is, because he's a great writer with his books, people will naturally gravitate. Hey, Stephen, do you believe that the God has created this universe? And I'm going to come to this point, yeah? Of course, when someone faces this question, he is deep enough, courteous enough, not to say, oh, this is rubbish. Okay, no. He was actually courageous, brave, to actually pose an answer, which you might not like, or none of us like, and he's going to give you the reasons of why, which I'm just going to mention in a minute. You see what I'm saying? So therefore, he was not on a quest to feel try to prove this. No. His journey was, is this, I want to understand the dynamic of this universe. Was there time or no time at the beginning? And if there is or there isn't, why? And what is the right theory to describe it? Like me, I'm not interested from a scientific point of view whether there's God or not. But if someone throws a question at me, that's the way I'll say it. In my book, I cannot prove it or disprove it. But if I see the laws of physics as a result of actions there, that's more evidence to that. Now, when he replied to me and he said, well, after my answer, he said, and this is here, and this is what my answer, and it's a very nice one, because he said, God is going to be weak. He cannot change the laws of physics. He cannot suddenly jump and change them. And my answer back to him said, Stephen, why God should interfere? And then he looked at me and he smiled, and it was a very nice big smile. And that was the end of the conversation, in a good way, not in a bad way. Why? Because I could tell at that moment, when I answered that nobody can actually, even from a logical point of view, assess whether God was weak or not weak, because we cannot assess why God chose to interfere or not to interfere in the laws of nature. So all these questions become relevant. So that's why actually it was a very profound moment with him, but it reached an ending where actually he, in the way he smiled, he acknowledged that, yes, you cannot even tell whether that God is weak or not weak, because you can never tell whether he chose to interfere or not to interfere. Okay. So that kind of throw him to now, 2018. Coming to your question, yeah? When people now pushed him, say, okay, Stephen, do you think God created the universe? That infuriates him. Why? Because he said, this question is nonsense. What do you mean by that? Because if I want to answer you from the physics point of view, space and time popped out of nowhere. So where did God have time to create time? You see what I'm saying? We are quoting the language now. Yeah? If something popped out of existence and here's time and space, how could God have a time to create that universe? So for him, because of that, purely on a logical framework, that there was no need for God. God wasn't there. Then later, in his books, so as you can see his journey, it was turbulent. In 1984-85, he thought God was weak. He cannot interfere in the laws of nature. Yeah. Then in 2010, when he wrote the grand design, he abandoned completely the picture of God. He said, we just happen to be one possibility among infinite many possibilities, because there were so many, millions and millions of universes. Yeah? In 2018, now it's no more millions of universes, there's finite amount of universes there. Yeah? And there is a beginning, so what happened? Could time really keep up out of nothing? No. Maybe that theory itself has broken because of the fallacy of the general theory. But we don't know what Stephen's last thoughts on this, because unfortunately he died. It would have been great to know, once after he published that paper, whether he has actually changed this thing. Because, as I told you, his view about God was coming purely from a scientific point of view, that, you know what, there was no time for God to create time. That's exactly. Things pop out of nowhere. So, this is coming to my end of my talk. The good thing about this guy is that he was a brave man. He was brave, he was daring, he was not scared to answer controversial questions in science. Yeah? And to be able to kind of link to the common man. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people in the common man, they attack him. Oh, his book is rubbish because he doesn't believe in God. Come on. He made his choice. I made my choice. You can make your choices. That's what it boils down to. So what I have learned from being with this man for 4 years, I tell you, I've learned quite a lot of physics with him, and I challenged a lot. Sometimes I agreed with him, sometimes I disagreed with him. That's part of science. But the one thing I have learned, and I cherish with myself till this day, is the fact that no matter what life throws at you in terms of hurdles, handicaps, issues, it should never stop you from following your dream and your aspiration. Never. Never let any issues, whether it's I know the students are not here, but whether it's a bad grade, or your supervisor, was not happy with you, or you applied for jobs and you got rejected. By the way, Stephen Hawking, when he was at Oxford, he didn't get first class, he got second class, and Oxford wanted to get rid of him, so he went to Cambridge. Cambridge realized he was smart. So in life, you'd never be judged by your grade or by your job, or also just working on fashionable stuff so that you can get a grant here and there. He actually tried to tackle the most important problems in physics, and he didn't bother how the rest of the world thought of him. He tried to tackle the most controversial questions, and he didn't bother what people thought of him. So this is, for me, was a very personal thing, is that, if I want to do my science, I know things are going to be tough in life. I know things are not going to work out like the same way I expect, but I will not give up on keep trying and keep, searching for my dream and for my knowledge. And that's, I think, the key thing that for me was personal. In fact, it's ironic that myself, about 15 years ago, I left, the academic world because I thought the academic world also, at least in theoretical physics, was getting lost in terms of fashion. Fashion creeps into science. If you work on a popular topic, you'll get a grant. If you don't work on a popular topic, you don't get a grant. That's sad. You should be working on a topic that you think is very important, and you might be able to solve it. And who knows? Only the great minds, one day they will see. You might be alive, you might not be alive. Boltzmann, a great mathematician, when he died, people realized that what he wrote and what he discovered was one of the most profound discoveries of the 20th century in statistics and mechanical physics. And without Boltzmann, there's a lot of things we don't understand. So this is something I learned on. And then when I ventured into the industrial, world, relative physics, I embarked on a new topic of, science, which is data science, machine learning. So I've been doing this also for the last 15 plus years. And guess what now? Now I'm interested in, quantum computers and quantum machine learning and topics that is actually combining quantum physics and machine learning. And this hopefully should have implications in, neurology, neuroscience, biology, and all that. So the lesson is, never hold back. Whatever life throws at you, pebbles, obstructions in life, just keep ahead, keep trying, keep pushing, and eventually you will hopefully aspire your dreams or some other dreams which could be equally as good. Thank you very much. Tell me, let's see. From the physics of fun. Yes. He affected me a lot, because here I am with a person who's extremely handicapped, very difficult to understand. Yeah, exactly. Good point. What drove him, he was a dreamer. I tell you, and I mean it in the literal sense of a dreamer. The man used to sit down and dream that he was traveling through the universe, he was going through black holes and imagining it, because he can't walk, he can move, So it is the dream, the hope that he will actually solve the theory of the universe. Because actually after his singularity, discovery, yeah? He made another big discovery about black holes. And you remember, everybody knows that what's black hole? Black hole is something where gravity becomes infinite and everything disappears. Even light comes out of it. He came and said, no, in fact, something could come out. A black hole could radiate particles. It can throw out particles and can keep doing it until it disappears. That was a big, big discovery, and they should have given him the Nobel Prize for that, but they didn't, unfortunately, because it's political. So he was a dreamer, and he was actually a traveler in his mind. And when I talk about his mind, I'm sorry to say this, doesn't demean any of us here, but his mind capacity and mental capacity far more exceeds than any of us here in this room. Because all his focal powers came to his brain. So he used to travel. He told me, I travel in the universe. He sees the black hole. He imagined how it is. And he actually did put that in his book. That kind of motivated him a lot. But the reality is also sometimes, unfortunately, Stephen became ill. Sometimes get sick. In 1985, he went to CERN. He became very sick. He was just a scratch away from dying. And the man is amazing. His hunger for survival and his hunger for just keep on and not giving up kept him going on and on and on. So that's, I think, he was mentally so strong that he managed to overcome his physical handicaps. Does that make sense? It's very difficult to kind of visualize it or to comprehend it, but truly that was his situation. Even when he was talking to me, wanted to pose a question. You and I, we can say that question in a minute, yeah? For him, it takes him like, 10, 15 minutes to put that question. He didn't give up. He kept typing and mumbling and kneeling until I configured that question. And he wanted to make sure that that question was delivered to me so I can give him an answer. And the same thing with his students and all the guys that who work with him. They enjoyed working with him. Nobody, I'm telling you, nobody. When you are with Stephen, you don't see his handicap at all. Honestly, you don't. He is far more advanced and far more in terms of his thinking, courageous, driven. And when you see him in that mode, you feel like that. You feel exactly motivated the same way. Yeah? Yes.
What is your recommendation for people that are not in competition to make additional efforts out of that process?
Very good question. I'm glad you answered that. We do live in a time where it does matter if you are coming, these days you're from Harvard, MIT, Stanford, Princeton, Imperial, Cambridge, Oxford, yeah? You cannot take that away, that's a fact. But that should not take away at all from the quality of your work. And therefore, if you have an aspiration in any field of science, physics or non-physics, that you want to actually do a very good work, you can do it. All what you need is to look out on who is tackling important questions and be a brave man or a woman and tackle that question, attack it. Yeah? You will get noticed. I mean, look, I came from Lebanon. Yeah, it can be worse. From civil war. Yeah? Who would even think that? They accepted me at Imperial. And, when I accepted Imperial, I was very hungry. I was so driven. I wanted to know physics inside out. I was thirsty about it. So it got recognized by notable good people. So your good work, your drive, whether you are here or somewhere else, will get noticed by people in other universities. And it doesn't matter where you end up. And at the end of the day, as long as you publish good work, your work hopefully will be recognized. So my advice to you, it doesn't matter where you are. If you want to go to a top university, be it. If you are here and happy, be it. But make sure you tackle an important problem to solve. Don't go for just a quick run. Because then nobody will notice that work, nobody will notice you. Go and challenge the difficult questions. Ask and task and try to solve the difficult questions. You might solve them, you might not. But even attempt at them will get you the nice recognition and respect from people in your community. That's my experience. You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you.